y'all doing out here? What are y'all doing out here?
What up? It's the Afternoon Sports Drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you. Jason Elmquist joining along as well. As it is Friday, we've made it through another week. No, I don't know about you, Jason, but I was off a full day thanks to Memorial Day weekend this entire week. But it's kind of a good problem to have if you think about it.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to have a Memorial Day or a Labor Day off. So today is technically my Memorial Day, but I'm still, obviously here on radio with you guys and not complaining or anything, but a couple hours of my day that spending with you guys.
That's right. It's the best part of the day, I'm sure. Let's look at some stuff in Oklahoma State news to start off here. I love this news because it's moving forward again with football. OSU will begin voluntary workouts on June 15th. That's when the Big 12 said it can happen. Oklahoma State's jumping on that right away, as we know some of the athletes will be in, I believe, Monday, even for rehabilitation. And after that, it will be voluntary workouts beginning in a couple of weeks. And we just continue to move closer. I think this is definitely another step. You look at the list of steps need to be taken for the football season to start. This is one you cross off, and we keep on moving forward. I know that these guys want to get into football workouts as much as they do anything else. That's what we keep having to remind people that those are probably a month away or so, I would say, at least from that. That's the next step I think that a lot of people and a lot of teams are trying to figure out is how exactly do we go about actual football workouts with doing all the guidelines and all the CDC measurements as well. That's going to be the next step.
Yeah, and Gundy actually tweeted out this afternoon that players will actually report on Monday, start testing. That way they can try to get going by the 15th. So the steps are being made, at least here at Oklahoma State, because obviously we know OU said they're waiting until the end of the month. So, yeah, I mean, it's going. And I think we've been saying it the past couple weeks. It's like we think there's going to be football at this point with the fact that these student athletes are going to be able to get back on campus within the next couple weeks.
Yeah, Gundy's tweets was, like you said, testing today is what he said. Players back on campus Monday, staff back to work. 97 days until kickoff in front of a loud and rowdy Boone Pickens Stadium. Better buy your season tickets. That last part there, is that going to happen?
I don't know. Because here's the thing, we it's not like we don't know if he's saying that because he knows something.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
If he's just trying to, obviously drum up the support and whatnot. Because we haven't heard anything from anybody, whether it's universities, conferences, NCAA. Nobody's commented really yet on whether or not we're going to have fans in the stands. I know Joe Castiglione was actually asked the question today, and I saw the quote about when the season will start, and he even the OU Day AD admitted, hey, we still need to figure out when we're going to start. Are we going to start on time? Are we going to have conference only? Are we going to split it into 2 seasons? They haven't even made that decision yet, according to Castiglione.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing right away when I saw that last part was because, Burns Hargis was on yesterday. And we talked about what he said. Well, they believe they have to have an announcement ready to go to the public by the end of July to start out and make sure that everyone knows where they stand with fans in the stands and all of that as well. Then you get Mike Gundy's tweet saying you better get your season tickets now because we're going to have a loud, rowdy stadium starting off in 97 days. So I don't know. I want to speculate that he might know, but at the same time, it would make sense. You wouldn't want to see the tweet maybe necessarily that says all of that, and at the end it says going to an empty stadium in 97 days. Can't wait. So yeah, you get where that makes sense. We've talked about it over and over again. Texas, as we talked about yesterday, announced that 25% of professional stadiums can have fans in outdoor stadiums. That's another step forward. It's going to have to become, I think, too, a regional thing like we've talked about. It's going to be a lot of different policies based on universities, how it's going. I mean, if the numbers are the same and we're continuing to decline in a month or two, I think all of a sudden you have the opportunity to have at least some fans in these stadiums. But I do want to prep everybody that it's not going to be the same experience as usual. That has to be something that needs to be accepted now. Whether that means you're going to have to sit 6 feet away from other people, whether that means that you're going to have to wear a mask. I mean, there's going to be drastic changes here if it means you get to view a game live in person. I don't know how many people that would directly affect in terms of not actually going to games. That's going to be the curious part. I don't know how many, if you just ask a bunch of people, I'd be interested to see. If you polled a bunch of people and said, would you go to a game simply if you had to wear a mask? Would you still go? I don't know. Around here, what do you think the response would be?
I honestly don't know, because I mean, we've had callers in where it was kind of a mixed reaction,
Yeah.
And then even with with Tom, someone who technically works the games, doing the essentially the play-by-play for the media up top, and I think right now we probably need to, I think, kind of follow what Iowa State is saying, that at the very least there's going to be fans, but it's going to be at half capacity right now. Obviously, that could change one way or the other, but I think that the fact that Iowa State's already made that proclamation that they're going to have, as of now, they're going to have a half full stadium. I think that's where Oklahoma State fans and across the board probably should start thinking that's probably going to be kind of the possibility. But we'll find out within, I think, the next month and a half if that goes either direction.
Yeah, I see Iowa State, what they're doing, and I see the ideas of Ohio State and even from the professional ranks talking about the new plans to have fans in stadiums, and it's looking like that's going to be a possibility. There can at least be some form of that. I like the guidelines. I've said it before. I like the guidelines that Miami put out there and the Dolphins, and I think a lot of colleges should actually pretty heavily look at that. You need to have enough in place to where you, first of all, can get the okay from health departments in your given state. When that's the case, then you can move on to, like Burns was talking about yesterday. Well, we have a lot of different options to weigh here. Can we manage to govern social distancing? Can we manage to make sure that every single person has their mask on if that's required? What do we do about tailgating? He threw, and then at the very end, after he talked about all those options, he just said, we've got a lot to sort through. And that's the case. I know exactly what Tom said yesterday. They have so many options that they're looking at here, from full house to normal, everything normal, to an empty stadium and all in between. And then the key is to be, which one are you going to decide? I have to believe it's somewhere in the middle, to where there's going to be, and I've said it before, that there was one time, and this shows you how much data changes with everything here. At one time, a month or two ago, I would have said, and I think I did, that I'd be very doubtful to see fans in the stands this year. Now here we are, ending May, basically, and I'm shifting more towards, well, we might actually have some in some capacity, and then that's who's to say what changes by the end of July. We could be sitting here at the end of July and fully expect a packed house, for all we know, at stadiums and maybe even Boone Pickens. So I think that people have to be ready for anything at this time. If I were to vote on it right now, my personal vote, I would say let's do it. Let's do 25%, or let's move, if we can, let's do half. Let's do our best, and if that means having to have more people in different roles at the stadiums on game days, fine. Let's make sure everybody is social distancing. Let's make sure everybody has the mask. Whatever we have to put in place, but still can get some fans in the seats. That's big time right there, because 2 months ago it looked like we'd have nothing.
Yeah, I think the big thing we have to keep in mind is ultimately it's not necessarily 100% going to be based on the decision made by the universities or the conferences. It's going to be on the governments, the city or the state government that each of these universities play within. They're going to ultimately decide if you can have because we got to keep in mind, they were talking, they shut down the Big 12 men's basketball tournament when they just said they were going to have 200 people in the stands, and that was it. I mean, they still, at the beginning of this pandemic. So I'm going to be curious how governments, whether it's Stillwater or Oklahoma or Norman or wherever, how much influence they have in saying how much of a large gathering is going to be allowed in each of these communities.
Well, and then you look at, like you said, the towns. I mean, if Governor Stitt were to say the 25% thing and say that he counts it for colleges, does Stillwater, does Will Joyce go along with that? Does Norman go along with that? I think that's going to be the next hurdle. And I don't want to really know how the reaction would go in college towns like this if the okay was given for the state, and then you get mayors of towns that say, well, no, we're not going to do that. I think that would just cause a little bit more unjust situations to occur around this area, and it does bring up an interesting idea like Norman talked about the other day. And in the city, they said, well, if we don't have fans in our stadiums, we could ultimately be creating a bigger problem because we're going to have lots of gatherings with lots of people around the town on game days. Like, that is 100% true. Then does it become more of a city issue type thing? So you're almost like, is it even better to have that opportunity to have fans in this type of controlled environment a little bit here? So that's definitely the next step forward. It'll be, and my guess here, my best guess is that it'll be a short time before we see more states adopt what Texas did. Texas leading the way, and I have to think that some of them, including Texas, at some point will get to the idea of hopefully allowing colleges to jump on board with this as well. The NCAA also proposing a 6-week preseason camp, basically football camp model for the upcoming season. That recommendation is planning to come out sometime next week as the details are still being finalized. But again, Jason, I mean, they're putting that out there, and for anyone that doubted if we'd have a football season, that right there almost seals the deal for me.
Yeah, and we got to keep in mind that's the thing is they're not expanding all that much. Because the fact of it is, I think you usually get about 3 to 4 weeks of fall camp. So I mean, you're getting an extra 2 to 3 weeks probably. And a lot of that, my assumption is going to be trying to just make sure conditioning, because you can train as much as you want, but once you get the pads on, stuff like that, then you're going to have to focus, I think, a little bit more on conditioning. So maybe that's why you get those extra few weeks. Just to prepare for that stuff. So I think it's ultimately, we've been saying it, heck, going back a month ago, that, July 15th, mid-July, if they're wanting to start on season and this was when they were speculating a month ago of a possible 6-week window for fall camps and whatnot, would fall there. And I think we're kind of ahead of it because people are now talking about getting back on campus well before even that date of when the 6 weeks fall camp starts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you saw this news as well. Brennan Presley, who signed with Oklahoma State, he was named the top male high school athlete regardless of sport in Oklahoma by Max Preps. And I did some digging into those numbers of his in high school. The senior season, my goodness. You can see why. It's 98 catches for over 1,500 yards, 24 touchdowns. And they said that he definitely has a possibility to be kick returner, punt returner for Oklahoma State in some capacity as well, since he did that in high school. And a lot of the articles talking about the same thing. Hey, the five receivers entered the transfer portal recently for Oklahoma State. So I don't know. Do you see Presley having a key role all of a sudden for Oklahoma State?
Not this season in the offense. Again,
special teams.
He could potentially be a special teams guy. But even look to last year, some of your stud wide receivers that came in, essentially redshirted, didn't even get, some guys that we thought would be potential special teams candidates that weren't utilized. They still use their veterans, the guys that they're a little more trusting with their fair catches and their kick return and stuff like that. So my assumption right now would be Presley probably redshirts. You don't see much of him except for maybe in that 4-game window that you're allowed to still have a redshirt.
And on top of all of this fairly good news here, the NCAA also put out a proposal today, basically a plan to offer help in bringing players back on campuses, as they are going to be coming back to campuses around the country very shortly. And not a lot of detail. I mean, it's pretty laid out, but I mean, not a lot of big details that would shock a lot of people that are in the plan. A lot of guidelines, obviously, dealing with health and all of that, making sure everything's clean and safe for these players and this staff. It's very important to me, at least personally, to see the NCAA coming out here and saying, hey, we're taking this serious. We're also ready to get back to a football season and not panicking right now. This is a good start. They still have a long way to go, but I've also been able to think a little bit too, hey, college football, we talked about how the NFL and the timing with the coronavirus pandemic and everything was actually perfect for the NFL. It couldn't have gone better for them. College football, it wasn't that bad, honestly. It could have been a lot worse had this happened starting now, for instance. We're able to get things started back up before the season starts. Based on what the NCAA says here about giving the plan, and we talked about the 6-week training camp and everything, based on everything that you've seen, Jason, do you see this college football season starting on time, regardless of how it goes down, regardless if it's playing out-of-conference matchups or not? Do you see it starting on time?
I'm still not 100% certain because we haven't heard from the Pac-12 yet. I mean, we don't, and the reason I bring that up is because Oklahoma State, if they're going to start on time, they need Pac-12 to be able to play. So that's why I'm not 100%. I think we're definitely gonna have a season. Right. But until we get more definitive answers from these conferences of if they're going to allow stuff, because at this point, it's SEC, Big 12, I mean ACC essentially. Although I don't think anyone actually pays attention to the ACC weirdly enough of late. Outside of listening to what Clemson says, I don't think anybody else cares what they're doing. Obviously the Big 10, I haven't heard anything like definitive from them of when kind of like how the SEC and Big 12 have come out and said we're going to allow people back on starting June 8th or June 15th. So those conferences, it's where I'm kind of still trying to figure out if we're closer to 100% starting on time, and once we find out from them. Yeah, the last that I saw from the Big Ten, and this was like a week ago, was when they said that they will leave the return to athletes for athletes up to a campus individual idea there. So you're basically going to have all those schools saying when they can come back individually, which is kind of an interesting approach. I mean, like you said, you get the SEC and the Big 12 saying here's the dates, and you get the Big 10 going off a per campus basis. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to go about it. I would think it would make sense to kind of do what the Big 12 and the SEC did and say, here's our day when we're saying it's good to go, and then kind of let schools go from there. But to ultimately let the schools do it and then all one by one, I'm not really sure. Well, there might be some that hold out. And that's the interesting thing is because, I mean, we're kind of seeing that within the Big 12 with OU saying, well, while you've told us we can come back this date, we're actually doing it then. So, I mean, you still have the universities making their own decisions within the Big 12, but they've at least allotted you a window, the Big 12. Of saying, hey, that's what I'm saying the Big 10 should do. Yeah. But at the same time, by them saying we're going to let them decide, that ultimately says you're giving the window as the NCAA the June 1. So ultimately, I mean, obviously we're 3 days away from June 1. So I don't see any Big 12 or Big 10 programs starting back up their fall sports or whatnot. But I mean, conceivably they could come out and say today, we're going to have Ohio State's football program players will be back on campus June 1 because NCAA says, and Big 10 isn't restricting us as to when that date could be. I have to believe that those announcements are going to be coming very soon. I mean, with this June 1st date literally around the corner and athletes returning in other Power 5 conferences, it's got to be soon. When we come back, we will get into, the Power 5, actually, speaking of, had a pretty interesting take on the name, image, and likeness. I know that those three words strike the fear into some people. Name, image, and likeness. Oh my goodness. We're going to talk about that next year on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
All my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle paid the price. One slice, got to roll the dice. That's why all my life, I've been grinding all my life. Look, all my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle paid the price. One slice, got to roll the dice. That's why all my life, I've been grinding all my life.
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network, 93.1, 105.1 FM here in Stillwater, Triple Play Sports Radio app. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you on Friday afternoon. Thanks for hanging out with us for a little bit. The NCAA has been the topic of conversation so far. The Power Five made an interesting move today regarding name, image, and likeness. They sent a 3-page letter, 3 pages long, and I attempted to read some of it as much as possible here. It got kind of boring after a while, but I got the clear gist of it. 3 pages to Congress. Straight to Congress to, quote, enact clear national policy on NIL and not wait for NCAA process to conclude. So there will be uniform national standard that will preempt state NIL laws. Time is of the essence, end quote. We talked about this. This was breaking news. It's been a while now, but when the NCAA is scheduled to approve more drastic NIL laws to where athletes can officially make money off their name, image, and likeness, and that was supposed to take place in the start of the 2021-2022 season. The Power Five is saying we don't want to wait around for that so much, so we're going to go straight to Congress and try to get this pushed through. Are you surprised by this at all, Jason? I think the Power Five, they want this to happen now, obviously.
I am a little bit surprised because obviously Bowlesby's name's on it.
Yeah.
People are questioning.
Oh, did you see his signature?
His autograph.
My goodness.
That's a lot of tease for Bob Bowlesby, because he's been a guy who's been almost kind of more on the NCAA side of, do we necessarily need it? But if we do have it, we need to have, some type of structure and whatnot. He's been a guy who it seems like he's been okay with kind of putting this off. But now, his name, I'll say his name, not his signature maybe, but his name's on that as well now. And I think it's because maybe they were starting to feel the pressures of the fact that, hey, some states are going forward. We got to keep in mind, there are some states where it goes into law, maybe the start of January 1, and the NCAA and I understandably they kind of have had more things to worry about, but that's still a significant thing that they need to have processed, especially considering it's not like these states are suddenly saying, oh, we'll give you guys time because of the pandemic, we'll hold off on the decision. It's like, no, those decisions were passed before. They can't really go back on it now. So it makes sense to say, hey, before it becomes individual states here at the end of the year or beginning of next year, we need to just have a blanket national decision on this.
I think it's one of those things where it has become such a strong and quickly moving freight train here that you realize it's not going to stop. I mean, this is going to have to become part of college sports, and it was elevated this season. I mean, it also have to think that maybe some of the scandals can continue to play into it here. I mean, Kansas, we'll look at that. The talk with Zion Williamson. I mean, all this stuff, and it's like, you know what? We have to get this enacted now. Like, it needs to happen, especially, I don't know how many of those Big Five commissioners are, if you had to put a lie detector on them, are completely okay with it. But like you said, whether it's Bowlesby or whatever, and they hop on, they go, this is the time, and I'm not going to have to be that one that stands off on this and gets run over by the rest of the conferences. So you get that part. It did surprise me that they wanted it done, I guess, so quickly, right away. I mean, the 2021-22 season was the original idea, so much so that they went straight into Congress. It also shows, and I mean, we could go down an inconceivably long list here of how many times conferences are so on the other end of the stick with the NCAA. I mean, it really is. Like, you could go over and over and over and say they just can't ever agree or all get on the same page, whether it be with timing, whether it be with legislation, what have you. And I don't know if you thought that way about this too, but to me, it was almost, again, the conference saying, you know what, we're not on the NCAA's time here, they're on ours.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of the power move from these conferences, and that's one thing that I've wondered for the past couple of years of and along with a lot of people of, do the 5 conferences, power conferences, consider at some point just kind of going off on their own and getting away from the NCAA? And this is essentially kind of this isn't in a broader sense them getting away, but it is kind of simplistically they're making the decision, hey, if the NCAA is not going to move along, we're going to go ahead and force it forward by bringing the government involved.
Yeah, I mean, there are no holds barred here. I have to think that the NCAA is right now just got their head in their hands shaking it right now going, come on. We thought we had this ready to go for this type of this year, not whenever the Power 5 conferences want. So that poses the question here, does Congress accept this, and does it quickly move forward and possibly take into effect this upcoming next season?
Say that again?
Well, that poses the question now, does Congress ultimately pass this? Do they go over and try to get it and accept what the Power 5 conferences are saying and say, let's get this done and let's do it quickly here and make this a point of emphasis?
I would believe so, because if you go back to with the MLB shuffling their feet with PEDs, and ultimately the government stepped in. So I think it's a case where the government's going to start basically holding committee meetings and having these discussions, and maybe that forces NCAA to get back to it and be quicker with it, to where maybe ultimately the government never has to actually pass something. But I think this is going to speed up the process, either by the government going forward with it or the NCAA saying, okay, we need to act now before the government has to ultimately takes control over it.
Yeah. Does the NCAA say, oh, actually, we were thinking this time the whole time. We just wanted to make sure and get that out there now. Yeah, that definitely could be something or the NCAA could be the NCAA and then not do anything. This is kind of some sucky news right here. We talked about it yesterday, and it's the same way here today. It just keeps kind of getting worse. And talking about minor league baseball, minor league baseball, it's not going to happen this season. I'm fully confident in that, and we're seeing these hundreds of players being cut. The numbers could be up into the thousands before it's all said and done. Major League Baseball, we know they had talked about at one point wanting to get rid of a number of minor league teams anyways. This, however, is tough because when you look at some of the youth and these players that are getting cut, these aren't just veterans getting cut along the board. There's a lot of young players, and they've expressed concern that their major league career could be over. I mean, do you see it that way? Because I can understand that. Yeah,
because I mean, that's the thing is, I kind of tweeted it out when Jeff Passan first kind of made the announcement that he had heard that that there were cuts coming. Is how many OSU guys who they are right now currently in the minor league system, and they're trying to figure out, and that's the thing is, like, this isn't just their jobs. This is a dream for many of them. And, as of yesterday, I talked with Trey Cobb and Carson Teal, and they, as of yesterday, said that, they're still employed essentially. But it'll be curious, kind of as I said yesterday, if the major league players don't consider kind of bending to the will right now of the owners when it comes to the money. I think ultimately the minor leaguers are going to see end up on the negative side of that.
This has to be, like I said, for Trey, and I mean, this has to be, and for all those guys, one of the worst situations to be in, knowing that call could come any day. You just don't know. Yeah. With the way that it's happening now, we know that all minor league players were given a $400 a month stipend allowance thing there. The A's, they said they weren't going to do that. They were done. I have to think the other teams might be falling into that as well. I think it was David Price I saw today that ended up paying out. I forgot the amount that he ended up paying, trying to keep minor league players whole, basically. So some of these guys, we saw that in the NBA too. Some of these guys are trying to help out. Here's the thing: when you look at some development farm leagues in Major League Baseball, there are some that it really, really works. I mean, I look at it from a red-colored glasses here, but St. Louis, my goodness, the Cardinals in Double-A have had a numerous amount of players come straight from that organization all the way to the major leagues and have been fantastic. Yeah. There's a lot of others that are like that too, but there's also quite a few franchises where you look at the prospects that come into their farm system, Double-A down even, or Single A down to whatever, all those leagues. And you can see where, I don't know, I mean, I believe that there's some spots where you can trim the fat here.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, you get down to it now, you've got, you had like rookie A ball, rookie ball, low A, right, low single A, stuff like that. And let's be honest, most of those guys, if they haven't didn't move up, instantly like a Trey Cobb and a Carson Teal, there's probably no future in baseball for them. So I understand. Go ahead and saying, hey, let's cut. We can start cutting the fat there, and that's my assumption is, I haven't heard from these reports where the fat's being cut right now, but my assumption would be it'd be those lower levels, because again, keep in mind, that you have no rookie ball. So if you were in rookie ball last year and that's where it was kind of expected you'd start, you're probably on the outs as well. Low single A, I wouldn't be surprised if it was from some of them as well instead of the high single A. My assumption would be if there's any double or triple A guys, it may be guys who were, in the older, let's say, guys who had maybe been into the league and, they've been, kind of those guys that you're waiting, maybe something will click and they might be able to make a jump full time to the major leagues. Maybe those guys got trimmed. I think, again, for me, someone like Trey and Carson and those guys, where you're just you've seen them on the rise the last few years, it makes sense not to cut them right now, because the thing is, you still need, like you said, you still need a farm system, you still need a product.
You do.
Because a lot of, you're going to have to deal with injuries. You never know when somebody, the next, Chris Adams in Baltimore, who's going to go from a high-paid slugger to being one of the worst batters in the history of the game. So stuff like that you got to keep in mind as well. So I think it makes sense to try to cut right now, because from what I heard, even before the pandemic, this was kind of something that was being talked about anyway.
Yeah.
And I think this just sped up that process.
Yeah, that's what I kind of hit on. It wasn't this brand new idea. I mean, we've seen it before, the idea of talking about just cutting minor leagues in a lot of ways. And I know that was one of the things Manfred got a lot of backlash for early on. And understandably for some of those guys, I have to think that this will increase competition even more in baseball, because it's just like you said, franchises need farm systems. Like, that has to be part of a successful franchise, but we're not going to see it at the depth that it used to be. There's going to be guys that ultimately may have started off in a single A league or lower than that will never get the light of day in minor league baseball.
Oh, and it also sucks, not just for those players, but ultimately with this amount of players being cut, that means likely teams and organizations, the Duluth, Durham Bulls or whatever. So those organizations have probably been cut as well, and how impactful that will be for those communities. Because that's the thing, we're talking about. OSU Stillwater relies on Oklahoma State. Some of these smaller communities where these minor league systems are based out of, they rely on those summer months of having that revenue coming in, and that's going to hurt those communities as well.
Yeah, and they're all over the country. I mean, I advise, if people are curious of how many minor league teams are just in the United States, I mean, you can go on and on and on, and they're often in small towns, and like you said, and I know that where I'm from, Springfield relies on the Cardinals there, absolutely. Single A teams all over are kind of the same way for those towns, and yeah, they're extremely important. I think you kind of hit on it too. The worst part of it is that, like, this was these guys' dreams. I mean, you make it into the minor leagues, and that's one step closer to becoming, you can call yourself a professional baseball player, which you technically are, but that's one step closer to actually being on the professional team. And you always see those situations where, I love it. The first one that comes to my mind is Tommy Pham. He was in the minor leagues for, I can't remember now, it was an absolutely ridiculous number of years. I mean, no guy in their right mind would have spent as long a time as he, and he's not the only one. Some of these guys have spent in the minor leagues into the teens sometimes, and they finally get a break. X happens and Y happens and Z happens, and they're able to slide up into a spot in Major League Baseball. And I think that those opportunities are going to be the ones that are gone now, because there were guys that, if they got a spot maybe once and weren't able to keep it for whatever reason, either the guy they were therefore comes back, or they didn't hit well enough, whatever, they get slid back down and into minor leagues, and a lot of times they were forgotten about. Anyways, at that point, there's no longer going to be necessarily this avenue to go back and try to get yourself back into the game, because there were so many leagues, whether they were even, wood bat leagues, minor leagues, whatever. Independent leagues are still a thing. all of that, when you had that opportunity to find your way and grind and try to get back. It's hard enough to make Major League Baseball in the first place. But with this, I have to think, like I said, the competition is going to go up. Only the best of the best are going to be able to make it. We talk about guys that come out of college, say, oh, well, that guy's pretty good. No, you got to be really good from now on. Like, that's going to happen. If you want to make the leap and get to pro baseball, you have to be the cream of the crop.
And it makes sense, but at the same time, it's unfortunate because they're like you said, a guy like a Tommy Pham, that maybe a guy who, if they had gotten that extra year opportunity where something just finally clicked for them, that you could have ultimately suddenly then shot up the ranks. So I don't think you're going to see those, maybe the rags to riches stories as much, I think, anymore, because it's going to be more of a, we're only looking at the next Mike Trout and the next Alex Rodriguez and stuff like that, rather than we're looking at the projects anymore.
Which, I don't know, as an average Major League Baseball fan, maybe you're okay with that, but as someone like me, I don't know how, I think you're pretty big into baseball too. Those were the ones we loved. I mean, seeing some of those guys, that the things they had to do, the way they had to get through minor league systems and literally claw their way up to the top and finally get there. That's what baseball was about.
There's a reason, and it's not, obviously it's a great movie and people enjoy the comedy of it, but Bull Durham, I mean, because you heard, the story of it wasn't necessarily the pitcher that we were rooting for, it was the catcher. It was Kevin Costner who, talked about how he had, got to spend a couple of days at the major leagues, and the the reaction from the minor leaguers fawning over him of, oh, what was it like? Tell us, blah blah blah. Like those are the stories that we like to hear, because it's the whole underdog story that you kind of tell and that people really enjoy. People love the Michael Jordan type of documentaries, the great ones, but you get so many underdogs. There's a reason people, in my age group, absolutely love the Mighty Ducks, because they were the underdogs.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's not uncommon to root for that, and that's what's going to be lost from all this. So, as I said to start off this segment, I severely doubt we're going to have minor league baseball. You saw that stadium, I forgot where it is now, that rented out as an Airbnb for some people to take advantage of. I think that's another. I don't know if you had seen that. I'll have to send you the link, because there was a minor league stadium that rented. It's like $1,200 per person per night to rent out this minor league stadium as an Airbnb. You could stay there. You could play on the field. You could there was like bedrooms and stuff. You could sleep there. Yeah. And they said, hey, we got to make money somehow. And
that reminds me. Did you see what the Miami Dolphins, the Hard Rock Stadium is going to be doing?
Yeah, they kind of did.
Movie theater.
Yeah, they kind of did the same thing with the drive-in movie theater, putting up hundreds of cars in there to watch an old style type drive-in movie. That's awesome. I mean, you got to give credit to some of these places that are using these innovations and then trying to get money into their stadiums and their facilities. That's the thing, though. When I saw that with the minor league stadium, I was like, we're not going to have minor league baseball. I mean, they got to find ways to profit off of their location right now, and it's not going to be with players. Would you agree with that? No minor league baseball this year, most likely. I mean, there hasn't been an official announcement yet, but I have to think it's coming soon with all these cuts.
Oh yeah, well, especially when you have organization, who are already penny pitchers like Oakland saying we're not paying our minor leaguers the rest of the year, then they're not coming back, because you're not going to be those guys aren't going to play for free.
No, they are not. The Major League Baseball players won't even pay for a reduced cut. We'll talk about that later on. Also, when we come back, we'll get into a little bit of the NBA. Probably before that, though, Melvin Gordon said something that was pretty funny, and is actually something that you and I talked about regarding the Chargers multiple times. We'll tell you what he said next here on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
She like my futuristic sound in the new spaceship. Futuristic if a Philip cake. She never need a man, she what a man need. So I keep on falling for her daily. We was at Coachella going crazy. Stack a couple M's like I was shady. Now I'm in Tribeca like I'm Jay-Z. Rockin' Torah, I'm not like he pay me.
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Got me moving dirty.
Hanging out with us on Friday. Hope everyone's having a great Friday into your week coming up. We've got you to take you into the weekend here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you. Former Chargers running back Melvin Gordon. Jason, he must have been listening to the Afternoon Sports Drive because he went on a podcast today. These comments were great. He was asked about the possibility of playing in front of no fans in the stadium. And he said, man, I was in L.A. This was from him. He said, I played with no fans in the stadium. What are you talking about? This prepped me. That came from Melvin Gordon. He obviously now with Denver. I think that there's no love lost between him and the Los Angeles Chargers.
No, not at all. Or the fan base, clearly.
or the ghost fan base.
Hey, there's 5 of them. Give those 5 fans credit.
And we saw that on the draft.
It doesn't matter if it's 5 or 1 million. It's still a fan base.
Yeah, I loved the story I read because it continued to go on and say, while most fans identified as fans of the visiting team that were in the stadium, I was like, this just keeps getting better. But it was pretty interesting. I mean, Melvin Gordon, when I think of NFL running backs, I'm trying to think of one that had a bigger smack in the face than Melvin Gordon trying to prove a point, ultimately doing so in such a bad way that he lost his job and was officially basically shipped out once that happened. I kind of feel for Melvin because I see where he was coming from a money standpoint. I've always kind of been a big fan of his, even though he's been on a Chiefs rival just because of his run style and everything. He's getting a lot of hate. He's got a lot of hate over his career. Not enough yardage, not per carry, whatever. Like, man, this guy's a good back. And I thought those were pretty great comments because it kind of does bring in that idea too of, hey, LA, ever since the Chargers decided to get out of there from San Diego to LA, and the Rams kind of the same way. Think of how many teams are in Los Angeles. I feel like so many people, they're like, another sports franchise. Now we got to go act like we're fans of that. Think of all the teams in Los Angeles and all the fans, quote unquote, compared to, say, in the Midwest or in the South. It's such a difference.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'm assuming you're talking not just for football.
No, yeah. I mean, look at all the basketball teams. You can go on the NBA, Major League Baseball. Yeah, I mean, you can go on and on. Hockey. I seriously, I just look at. I'm like, there's and not to mention college teams, right? I mean, all over California, it's like we get it. Like we understand the financial implications of moving your team into LA, but for a fan base, it seems like the Rams and the Chargers forget how important a fan base truly is to a team.
Yeah, well, and again, are we really that surprised? Because look at one of the teams leaving the state. One of the most popular teams from the state is leaving it for Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, the Raiders are gone, and it's just I kind of feel because I've always thought that the Chargers, especially the last few years, and part of the reason they just had no reason to not be good these last couple of years, and part of the reason I thought they just don't have support. And I kind of thought to myself, I would hate to be in that franchise going out there every single Sunday at the home field knowing, well, here we go, it's going to be like back in high school. I mean, really, it's like not the same. And I feel like that I guess I'm kind of spoiled, obviously, being a Chiefs fan, knowing how it is at Arrowhead Stadium. I couldn't imagine going out there and not having a crowd to back it up. So I get where Melvin's coming from this, in all seriousness. And I have to think that's going to be one of the worst feelings as a pro athlete. You finally made it to the pros and everything else that comes with it. And then on top of it, well, this is all great and I made these huge leaps and milestones and everything. I don't even have a fan base to support me. I had a bigger fan base in college. That's got to feel bad.
Unless you went to KU, then you feel right at home with you.
Yeah, well, there's outliers. I mean, some of these guys are 100%, used to it. So but for Melvin's sake, I think he's going to get a little bit of a wake up. We know how fans can be in Denver. So he will actually probably experience more of a fan base there. Now, since I brought up the Broncos, are they, in your opinion, going to be the most competitive team other than the Chiefs in the AFC West?
Yeah, but probably just by default. I'm not 100% sold on Drew Lock yet. But the fact of the matter is, he's still in the limited games that he showed us last year. Is still in my mind ahead of your options in Tyrod Taylor and David Carr for the Chargers and the Raiders. So I right now I'd probably, and obviously I think Denver still has the better defense. I think we can all argue that they still have the best defense in that division. So I think it's a case where I would probably put them as my number 2. I don't know if they're good enough to be a playoff team, but I definitely think they're going to be finish second in that division.
It's crazy to think, but how true is it really that when you look at Justin Herbert with LA, if he ultimately becomes a starter and fairly quickly too, he could be the 3rd best quarterback in the division or the 2nd best quarterback in the division. I mean, it's really the truth. I think that Drew Lock has what it takes, and he showed some signs of that last season in a limited role. I really will be interested to see what he does in a full season and with some of the weapons at his disposal.
Let's put it this way with the LA Chargers right now. I would take the Raiders' backup quarterback over Tyrod Taylor right now.
Yeah, it blows my mind when I think back to the draft and people talking about LA, like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? I mean, Tyrod Taylor, he is an experienced guy. He's going to be I just can't believe that was the conversation. Now, Tyrod Taylor could come out and he could start the first game and he could just go off and maybe he has again, people are proved wrong, but I seriously doubt it. I really have no reason to believe that's going to be the case.
I think it's fair to say, maybe it's just the system he was in Buffalo, but yeah. I mean, Josh Allen isn't the greatest quarterback, and he's still able to get them to the playoffs. So obviously, it's more about Tyrod Taylor not being that great.
Look, you have to be ultra competitive in that division. I mean, you just do.
Yeah.
To even survive, because you can't go 500 or right above it and think you're going to have a chance. So that's why the Chargers got to roll the dice.
Yeah, you have to go to the NFC East to be able to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, they're in the wrong spot. When we come back, the NBA inching closer and closer to returning. At one point, it seemed like that would never happen. Well, we may be on the doorstep of a season coming back. That's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what...
Hour number 2 of the Afternoon Sports Drive coming your way here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network, 93.1, 105.1, and the Triple Play Sports Radio app. You can listen wherever and whenever. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you as we round out the week here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. The NBA was the topic of discussion for a long time as that sport that wouldn't have a chance. I know I said it. I can't remember exactly if you had ever said it, Jason, that you thought they wouldn't come back. There was definitely a time where I said they wouldn't come back, and it didn't look like it. It really didn't. There was back and forth. There was, we had this idea, but we're really not sure, and there was just all that constant, over and over, week after week after week, into now months. Then we get the update today that Adam Silver informed the Board of Governors and the NBA, said, hey, you know what? We're playing on July 31st as a target date to return for the season. So they want to get that done right around the end of July to come back. And then on top of that, a majority of NBA GMs today voted for going straight into the playoffs, which I know is something you had talked about a long time ago. And I think that makes sense. Do you like the July 31st date? And I mean, if you're doing just playoffs, to me, that makes about as much sense as you can get right there.
I find it hard to believe that they're going to try it because the fact, like I've been saying, is you talk about the MLB guys not wanting to lose money and whatnot. Well, the NBA guys at this point, you're going to tell them that most of them are going to now have to turn around and have an even shorter window of recovery than they normally would between seasons. You're going to have to ramp up and expedite the whole draft process as well. I mean, like you're almost jeopardizing what your product's going to look next year by trying to finish it by having that be your start date.
Yeah, and when I say it makes sense, to me that's me saying that based on them not coming out and saying revising that date, because the end of July, it would have probably made more sense to try to jump mid-July even, or as early as the start of it. I mean, I find it hard to come up with any more excuses for why the NBA can get started. I mean, really, where we are now, and if they were able to jump straight into the playoffs, and I don't know, if they have to go 3 weeks or whatever they feel like they have to do before they can actually start playing games, then fine. But that's the part that has to start like now. And when they talked about the idea of going to Disney World, being in a bubble there, I know that the talk was also, well, maybe we can even put the families in there with them, which to me sounded like a terrible idea. And at that time, that was where every single team would be playing, obviously, to finish out those last couple of weeks. Here's what the owners were voting on. There were different options here. One was resume the regular season with all 30 teams, followed by a play-in tournament. There were 8 votes for that. Go straight to the playoffs with either a playoff in tournament or a World Cup-style group. 5 votes for that. Resume the regular season with all 30 teams, and then go straight into the playoffs. 1 vote for that. When you see all those 3 right there, or are you for that top one? Is that what you said, resume the regular season with all 30 teams followed by a play-in tournament, or go straight into the playoffs with either a play-in tournament or World Cup style?
Mine has always been go straight into the playoffs.
Yeah, go straight into the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. And I saw that, I don't know, I'm sure you did too, the other day Damian Lillard came out and said, hey, if we come back and I have to go in there and our teams are just doing playoffs and we're not going to be a part of it, because they were right out of that opportunity to be that last team, that 8th team in the West, then that has to play into it too, because I don't know, I feel like a lot more players would kind of feel the same way. I mean, we talked about this before, if that were the case, why would you come back? If you could use this as extra time to ultimately recover. I mean, this is a nice long break for some of these guys that had no chance in the playoffs anyways. That's why I never bought the whole Warriors thing, that they wanted to come back as a team. Like, no way. I don't believe that for a second. I have to think that Dame is speaking out for a lot of those guys. Say, hey, I don't even care. I'm not going to play if we have the opportunity to come back.
Do you feel like the NBA should consider then taking kind of a similar approach that the NHL did of, what was it, 12 teams from each conference? You seed you have your top 4 do the round robin, and then seed your 5 through 12 against each other. I mean, do you think something like that is something that NBA should consider doing if to try to stem that possibility?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think, though, the NBA needs to be ready to accept the idea. We may hurt some feelings here, but we need to literally just go straight to where the seedings are now. That's where we got to go, because they're running out of time to come up with more of these ideas. And like I said, that we're about to start June. It would have been ideal for them to start this training back in for 3 weeks or whatever they need to do, starting like Monday. Like, that would be ideal. I think that almost all practice facilities are open, if not all of them have been opened, and there have been some sort of practices and stuff going on. But when it comes to actually getting back on track for us, and the reason I think this too, we haven't talked about this yet, but Serie A and the EPL, they're all coming back in England and in Italy and all over in Europe, where they've had, and we're just looking at coronavirus stuff, where they've had twice the numbers in death rate per capita over there, and they're about ready to get back. I mean, they've already put dates when they're going to start in mid-June. So I'm really, like I said, running out of making excuses for why the NBA shouldn't be back, or at least have that secure plan ready to go. They come out and say July 31st. Will that ultimately allow baseball to? I mean, that's really a toss-up right now, but could baseball even come back before that date? That was the original idea, around July 4th. But to me, the NBA, man, I've tried to be in their corner at times when it comes to maybe they will start coming back now. but the time all of a sudden is starting to be a little wasted to me here too. And when you look at it, look at the idea of going into a bubble in Florida. Well, that might not even be the case anymore, where we're getting most of these states saying we're ready to have professional sports back here. Maybe they don't even have to do that in Florida. I think there's too many options, and we're moving forward at such a rapid pace now that we got to get NBA started out of all things. When it looked like it may never come back, it can come back.
Well, and that's the crazy thing is, because you'd brought up how NBA always seemed during this to be the first in line, to have the best response to everything. And right now, on the whole returning, crazy enough, NHL is looking like the most competent right now in regards to, hey, this is the approach we want to take. We've finalized it. Now we just need to make sure that we have the proper locations in place to hold this idea. But like it's crazy to think that NHL has figured out and have decided how they're going to approach their season better and quicker than the NBA and MLB right now.
And when
that's just crazy.
It is crazy because we've said the NHL, I mean, it's hard. You got to find ice. I mean, it's harder to find places anyways to go for an NHL and get everything logistically in line where we could go anywhere and play on a court for basketball. I mean, it really is. Like, people are like, no, it's not that easy. It is that easy, especially in unprecedented times like this. And I got to throw in there also with states that have said, we're ready. Like, come over here now and get started. That's why I think
I was going to say, even like if the NBA said, hey, we're not going to go down necessarily to worldwide, the worldwide of sports. But I mean, like you can find in Oklahoma City alone, basketball arenas all over to utilize to play multiple games. Yeah, that's not the case with hockey. I mean, you have to find specialized arenas that actually will be able to because I don't think Chesapeake Energy Arena or whatever it's going to soon be named with them announcing bankruptcy. I don't think it can actually hold a hockey there. I know obviously the Cox Convention Center across the street and BOK over in Tulsa can, but I don't think Chesapeake can. So that's to your point of it's easier to find places to play baseball and to play basketball. It is compared to NHL because you are very limited in what arenas are accessible to you.
Yeah, I mean they wouldn't want to do it, but basketball could play on high school courts for crying out loud at this point. I mean, if you talk about putting fans out of the equation here, which ultimately might not even be the case, but if that is the case, let's say it is, there's really no reason with all these things at the disposal, these opportunities that can be taken advantage of. Now's the time to get going, because that's why I give so many props to the NHL, because it's just like you said. I mean, people, it's almost like they had forgotten that, hey, they also had their season postponed at this point. And they were in the heat of it. They were 2/3 of the way done, getting ready to go into the playoffs, and that all stopped. And now look at them. They've almost quietly, I think, taken opportunities, taken advantage, saying we're not going to go. We don't have to deal with the crap that the MLB is doing. We're not going to be indecisive like the NBA. We're going to put our plan out there. And the reason I give so much credit to them also is because the players came out and approved on this as well. They were on board. They didn't go back and forth. No, you guys these owners don't know what they're talking about. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. They said, yep, we like that idea. We want to get back on the ice. And that's why they deserve all the credit in the world, because the NBA and the MLB can't get their act together when they have had plenty of time to do so.
Also want to give some credit right now. I just saw a tweet coming across within the past couple of minutes from Harold Kuntz up in Kansas City. Apparently, they have a Zoom conference or whatever with the Royals GM Dayton Moore, where we were talking about all these minor leaguers who've been cut in the past couple of days. According to Dayton Moore, again, this quote from Harold Kuntz on Twitter, quote, "The minor league player, they have as much impact on the growth of our game as 10 to 15-year vets. Those are the individuals that go back and teach the game. We felt it was really important to not release one minor league baseball player."
Wow.
So the Royals did not cut a single person, and apparently the follow-up tweet was that Moore basically said it was a very easy conversation to have with the Royals owner. So an organization, we talked, kind of ridiculed Oakland for their comments of not only are we cutting some, we're not even going to pay our minor leaguers. And here you have an organization like the Royals, which, have kind of fallen back to their pre-World Series roots, coming out and saying, you know what, we're dedicated to our minor league system because they're as important as the pros.
Based on what you know as a Royals fan or Royals ownership, are you surprised by that at all?
Well, this is new ownership. Like they just took over
Right.
over the offseason, so I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised in the fact that I know Dayton Moore. You know, the reason the Royals won a World Series about 5 years back was because of that farm system. They've always been, and honestly, it's because they've been in the top 5, top 10 for so long of most
I was going to
drafts.
say, they compiled plenty of draft picks.
Right, but they've always been good. That's the thing.
Development's been good.
Right, the development is also big. Not only do you get this opportunity for a great top 5 type prospect, but one guy isn't necessarily, it took Bryce Harper, a number 1 overall pick, leaving the Nationals before they win a World Series. So that goes to show that just having the best guy in a draft doesn't necessarily make in the MLB doesn't necessarily make you an instant contender. So I think that's why I'm not surprised, because Dayton Moore has always preached the importance of that minor league system. So, and again, you brought it up. I think the Cardinals, I would be shocked if they cut a lot of theirs, because they've always been dedicated to their, it seems like every single summer, we were talking about the Cardinals being in the hunt for a playoff spot. And okay, who do they need to trade within their minor league system to try to get that second ace or a better bat in the lineup? And they sit on it, and they don't trade, because they value those minor leaguers just as much as they do a pro player.
Yeah, and for a long time in Cardinals Nation, it was that, hey, we love these minor league players, we get why they're not moving and all this. And then these last few years, it's been, well, they haven't been given enough chances to, in the major leagues, for instance. We've had guys sitting there double and triple A when we've had guys that have been around in the majors that forgot how to hit the baseball. And so that's kind of been the question, too. But, yeah, I'm with you. I got to give credit, there to Kansas City right there, because you could easily do what the A's are doing, and they're not going to be the only team before this is all said and done. And so you have to appreciate that. If you're a minor league player in the Kansas City Royals organization, that might be the biggest sigh of relief of your life.
And that's why, having talked, just tweeted or text briefly with Trey yesterday, and then again today, we're going to hopefully try to get him in tomorrow or sometime next week. Mm-hmm. We were going to try to get him on today, and he's doing pitching lessons, try to, help pay the bills right now, especially when you have two twins, that are barely a year old. But it was a case where, he said, he's all clear, fingers crossed for now. And he's like, we'll see how it goes going forward. But I remember conversations that I had with him for my story for the news press, is the fact that he has the utmost respect for how the Mets organizations operate when it comes to their minor leaguers. He was telling me when he was doing rehab, because he had to show up back in January, 2 months before everyone else, because he was finishing up his Tommy John surgery rehab. And, they had an X amount of stipend that they get, which was while he was there, which was supposed to just be for meals. Well, he said that they would, they'd kind of say, hey, whatever's on the table for, meals, take it home. Basically, so all that money that he was getting that was supposed to be for meals, he didn't have to spend on meals, because the training table was offering up. He said at one point they took home a full stack of ribs to get through them for a couple of days.
Wow.
So I'm not surprised to hear some organizations better run who care maybe a little bit more about their whole organization, not just their pro players, of taking the approach of, we're not going to cut teams, we're not going to cut players right now, we're going to go forward as business as usual.
We could go down a list of every single team in Major League Baseball and put them into two categories based off what we've seen over the years. Franchises that truly believe in the farm system and have proven that, and those that buy teams and buy their players and build teams. And you can look at it from
but that's the crazy thing, is like Oakland's a team that kind of utilize their farm system. Yeah. But they almost utilize their farm system as a farm system for everybody else.
That's true.
Like they almost don't care for, let's be honest. Oakland Athletics organization, that ownership, they don't care about winning baseball. They care about money. Right. That's all they've cared about.
That's been made very evident over the years. And yeah, I think that's one of them falls in that category. I mean, when you look at some of the guys too, that you wonder, when you look at big time franchises and some of the ones that spend a ton of money on players, and and the Dodgers come to mind, the Yankees, those types of franchises. When you look at them and say, I wonder who is, it's almost like a shock when you hear, well, this guy came up through their farm system. You're like, whoa, really? He ended up making the team. I mean, really, that's how it is.
It's because we hear the big name, the big name signings, and we don't realize that they're supplementing those signings with their own products. Because one of the top Dodgers players in the outfield, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but he came up through their farm system, played in both, I believe, both Tulsa and Oklahoma City for several years before making it up there, and he's now one of their hearts of their order bats. And but we think of that them chasing after the.
It was Jock Peterson, wasn't it?
No, it was not Stigler or something like that. It's something like that.
Okay.
Within the past couple of years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he was. See, some of those guys, I think you kind of said it right there perfectly. And the way to put it, in the farm system, some of these teams, they grow their crops and they ship them out. And there's
Bellinger.
Cody Bellinger. Yeah, that's right. He was through the
Bellinger
system.
Came up there. Yeah, that's the guy I was thinking of.
He's become such a
I think
household name.
Bellinger and Sager, the shortstop, I believe, both came up through the minor league system through Oklahoma City and everything.
And that's one of those guys you can say that has become, I mean, my goodness, MVP category and was up through a system. And I feel like a lot of times that seems to be not the case as much anymore. Where I know, and I've said this before, I'm a fan of one of arguably the best to do it in the minor leagues, but there's something to take away from when you look at, and I've been harping this to the Cardinals last year and the years before, saying, you know what, we have these guys in the minor leagues, but if you're going to pull a Yankees and a Dodgers and not give them a chance, then at least you got to go out there and spend some big money.
And I'm curious what this means. How do all these players who got cut? Obviously, I'm going to be curious if the Oakland A's aren't paying their minor leaguers, if that technically considers them vacating their contracts where they can go sign elsewhere. What that means for other organizations who are staying pat and saying, hey, man, maybe I can go sign this guy that we were kind of interested in, but ultimately he had been drafted here and whatnot, or we saw as a possible star eventually. So I don't think all of these guys that are getting cut will never play baseball again. I'm assuming some organizations will probably give them a shot. It's unfortunate which organizations have taken this step and how they're going to, because here's the thing, what are they going to do come this time next year if we're back to normal and they've pretty much shut down a third or a half of their minor league system?
Right. And it may not be the case necessarily where all of them, like we talked about, are just out of baseball forever. But you have to think that it's a step down the ladder. They were climbing, and now they've had to take a couple steps back, which is not what you want. And to make matters worse here for minor league players, with Major League Baseball not coming to a deal yet, Rob Manfred was going to obviously let minor leaguers know if and when they can start joining those pro teams. Because they said they were going to expand those rosters. Right. If that's the case, you've got some of these guys that are sitting here like, am I going to end up even getting dropped before I had a chance to possibly join an expanded roster? I mean, to me, that's like rubbing salt in the wound right there.
Yeah, but I feel like, most of those guys, would have been talented enough that, if they were going to make the major league roster,
they'd be sticking around.
That they wouldn't cut them. Again, you would assume.
There may be a few guys on the fence, but.
Right. But I think we also have to keep in mind, like Tom made a good point, a lot of those guys in the extended roster probably were going to be guys who had some experience in the major leagues. You're not necessarily going to throw your prospects out there. And so maybe that is the case. Maybe those guys who were going to possibly make the extended roster are now cut because it's like, well, we were going to use you, but we don't know if we're ever going to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, and you saw probably that initial reaction when they said that, hey, we plan on expanding these rosters, which, if Major League Baseball comes back, they're going to have an expanded roster. Like, that's no doubt. You saw some of these guys probably in the minor leagues, their eyes lit up. This could be my chance. I was sitting there waiting for an opportunity, and here comes one. They need so many players, and I'm on that bubble right there to be next, and all of a sudden, take a right turn. It's unfortunate. There's so many layers to it, and bottom line, as a guy that grew up playing baseball, loved baseball, I can't imagine, for some of these guys that this has been their life's work, And in an unprecedented, 100% unprecedented situation, it's been cut short for some of these guys. When we come back, Patrick Mahomes is in current talks right now to start this massive contract that will be his. I'm going to find out what Jason would pay Patrick Mahomes. I'll tell him what I'd pay him. You can call in and let us know what you'd pay him. That's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
Yeah. Levitating off the blacktop. Used to struggle getting started, now I can't stop. Used to be the quiet kid in the sandbox, now it's hands up every time that your man rocks. They ought to stop me coming in again. You mad? You thought we were synonyms? Too bad that's the water you're getting in. You're too fat for the sharks that you're swimming in. Where I'm sitting, contenders are looking like fruit spinning around in the
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you, Jason Elmquist with you as we continue on here on Friday afternoon. Everybody prepping for the weekend. We are too here at Triple Play Sports, talking sports. I said before the break that I was going to ask Jason a very serious question because this is going to be a record-breaking deal coming to the Chiefs quarterback. So there's been talk that the contract negotiations have started with Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City. Obviously, we know that the end of that rookie deal is coming up, and there's been plenty of discussion. This is going to be, like I said, a record breaker. First, give me how many years? Let's be realistic. Don't talk with your heart here, because I know that you would say, well, I want Patrick Mahomes for 15 more years, but think from a financial standpoint. First, give me how many years on this upcoming contract should Mahomes get?
Well, and I think some of it also depends on where Mahomes is thinking, because obviously we just found out with Dak that he only wanted was a 4?
4,
he
yeah.
He didn't want 5. Is Mahomes? Is he taking the approach of, I'm set, I'm fine. I don't know the mentality between him and a Dak. Obviously, one's a Super Bowl winning champion, so I'm assuming he has a different little mindset than somebody who can't even win 8 games to get to the playoffs this past year. So, but I would probably say somewhere in the 5 to 6 range.
Yeah.
If I'm the Chiefs, I'm probably saying 6 is the top end of years that I would put on this contract. If I'm Mahomes, I mean, if I'm Mahomes, I'm almost saying kind of like that. I'm saying 4 years, because if I get any better, than I already am, in 4 years I can, or more like 3 years, I can then try to pony up for even more, because that's the thing is, we saw with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, or honestly, we can go back to Scottie Pippen from The Last Dance. If you go too long on your contract, ultimately you could get to a point where you're not getting paid what you're worth. So that's what we got to keep in mind as well, is over the next few years, quarterback pay is going to go up, even beyond what Mahomes makes. I mean, if let's say Dak doesn't re-sign, and then it goes into next offseason and he signs somewhere else, someone's probably going to be willing to pay him more than what Mahomes is getting paid. So I think if I'm Mahomes and his agent, I'm saying probably 4 is my kind of sweet spot. So I'm going to say somewhere between 4 and 6 years long.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go. We've seen Mahomes come out and says he wants to be a Chief for life.
That's the right thing to say.
That is the right thing to say, and I think he believes that. That's the thing, is that in any other situation, if you threw a quarterback here with, and I'm talking, I mean, people are gonna say like, hey, Alex Smith was there. What are you talking about? I'm talking about a quarterback with legitimate talent. Okay. I mean, even a top mid-tier. I mean, you could probably, maybe, I don't know, I might be reaching here. You could throw Dak in this system and it might work. But that's not necessarily the case. Patrick Mahomes obviously different than every other quarterback in every other way. When he's thrown in here with a coach like Andy Reid, with offensive weapons, and still finds a way to make it work with a defense that was not great, got better, but wasn't great. I think that I would be willing to offer him 6 years and I mean, that's going to be a ton of money. You're going to have, if you go 6 years, you're probably looking around what 240 something million before it's all said and done. And if you go 40 to 41 million a year, is he worth that? I don't know if there's really a number you can cap him on right now.
Here's the thing, though. I think if you're the Chiefs and if you're targeting 6 years, I think you're going to have to pay more than just 40, 41. I think you're going to have to push 45 to 50 million a year. Because otherwise, again, like I said, from the standpoint of Mahomes, you want to be able to restructure your deal within a couple of years because the value of yourself, and then the cap space is going to increase as well. So there's going to be an opportunity for more money. So if you're the Chiefs, I think you have to go big if you're wanting a big year contract as well.
And you have to kind of wonder too. I mean, you hope the coronavirus doesn't play a huge effect because we know that the cap increases every season, and with that as well, let's say it doesn't, and the cap increases and everything. I think if you could get away, if you could say, you know what, 6 years, 41 million, and he takes that with a huge signing bonus, maybe you could get away with it that way. You have to look at some of the other weapons too that you got to end up paying someday. It's naive to think that everybody's going to be able to stick around for the long haul. That's just not how it works with professional teams. But what we have seen is that when you're on your Chiefs team right now, you don't want to leave. And if that means making things happen in unprecedented ways and contract talks, fine. I just don't, you see that he would have a chance, and you understand why he would maybe want to restructure after 4 years. But like you said, kind of the difference, and why this also makes Dak's argument so dumb, is that Mahomes has so much early success and doesn't seem to be slowing down. Neither does the team at this point. You may be willing to say he's good enough as a quarterback to where we can throw weapons around him, and maybe he even recognizes that as well. The Chiefs are now going to be able to build around a quarterback. It's been a while since that has been the case. With that now being the case, you have more opportunities at your disposal. So maybe that does, make a part into Mahomes' head and say, I should work with that a little bit. I don't think that, if you ask Patrick Mahomes, does he deserve to get paid through the roof? Absolutely. I don't think he would ever try to, and his agent as well, try to just gouge Kansas City here. But they know this is going to be a record deal. Imagine, too, if the world were perfect and Patrick Mahomes were willing to take a more modest number with all of the endorsement money he gets as well. Because the endorsement money could be a separate contract. Let's be honest. So, I could see them throwing out possibly 6 years. 4 to 5 is probably more realistic. Let me ask you this. If they do 4 to 5, or ultimately 6, how many years do you see Patrick Mahomes in a Chiefs uniform? And does he retire in a Chiefs uniform?
I mean, that's so far down the road. I mean, that would be at least 2 more contracts and whatnot. I think, weirdly enough, I think a lot of it's going to dictate on who the head coach is, and not just Andy Reid. I mean, if Andy Reid decides to retire in 5 years, if you replace him with, I think a guy like Bieniemy, the OC right now, maybe that keeps Mahomes around a little bit longer, but I think ultimately it's going to be dependent on the head coach. I think if Reid's there if Reid decides, you know what, I'm not going to retire from football until he does, then I think he stays there. I think he stays with Reid for that entire stretch. So I don't know. What I think ultimately is going to be dictated by who the head coach is come 10 years from now.
It's going to play a big part, no doubt, I think, but also the roots were dug in so deep and so early. I think that is the big factor here. It was like immediate success. It very well could have been 2 Super Bowls already in 3 years. I mean, let's just be honest. With that being the case, and regardless of who's also standing with Mahomes at the end when his time comes, I have to think he doesn't want to change teams too much. Now, people are going to be, and this is what happened this year. I mean, it can be done to anybody. Right? I mean, Tom Brady obviously proved that. He looked like for a long time that it was almost unfathomable that we'd see him in a different uniform. I don't want to try to think of Mahomes ever being in a different uniform. That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and that's what I think is going to part of it's also going to come down to the approach that he has when his quote unquote talents are starting to diminish. If the organization says, okay, we if they take the Bulls approach, hey, we need to start preparing for the future. We're going to disband now, and if he has the approach of, you know what, I still feel like I have a few more good years in me, then he's obviously going to go somewhere else. So I again, right now, I couldn't tell you. Like my assumption would be he plays for Kansas City for another 10 years or so. But that's also wishful thinking, I think, right now, because we again, when we don't need, back in January, we didn't know that we weren't going to have an entire spring and almost an entire first half of this year with no sports. So I can't sit here and say that Patrick Mahomes 100% will play every single snap in his career with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to actually be confident in really anything at this point. But, that's what the great thing about Mahomes' talent is, and just his personality and character and leadership aspect of it as well, is that nobody on that Chiefs team wants to be gone. I mean, they just don't. Coaches to players. And you can ask them why, and they say, look at our quarterback. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be a part of something that could ultimately come down as historic. I mean, it really could. And it already has individually, but team-wise. This could be, as we've all said and we all know, the dawn of a new franchise. The Chiefs are the team to beat. The Patriots are no longer the team to beat. I think that a lot of that plays into, hey, we're not going anywhere unless Mahomes makes this crazy decision someday to leave, which at some point it might not seem so crazy, but who knows? It's interesting to think that far down the road. I know that, and lucky for us as Chiefs fans, it's that far down the road. And I think that also the case for the NFL, because Mahomes, ever since he's been in the NFL, that only helped the NFL in every aspect. I mean, 100% drew outside viewership like no other. More eyes wanted to see, oh my gosh, this kid has done what? And then that's been a huge plus for the league as a whole. When we come back, the Big 12, we'll talk a little bit about them. Money going around to these schools. We'll tell you how much each school will get now and how much of a hit they took due to the coronavirus pandemic. That's all coming up to wrap up the afternoon sports drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what.
Wrapping up the afternoon sports drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist along with you. As we wrap it up here, the Big 12 releasing numbers on how much money will be distributed to each school this year. We know, obviously, with all the coronavirus mess, that has changed a little bit. $37.7 million will be going to each school for the fiscal year, coming from Commissioner Bob Bowlesby. That total is down $1.1 million from last year. Obviously, the main reason being the cancellation of March Madness and those conference tournaments. So $1.1 million less. What I take away immediately, and I know that we had hit on it pretty early on during this whole thing, we said, you know what, the Big 12 and the SEC, Power 5 schools are going to survive this. If this were a consistent thing to happen, we'd be talking about something different here. If this ultimately becomes a one-time giant thing, a giant hit here, the Big 12 and the Power 5 are going to be able to, they're going to absorb that without having to make huge dramatic changes. For instance, unlike the MAC that's had to make a lot of changes, and then the American Conference and all that. I mean, you can go on, but I think the Big 12, when you look at everything, and also the addition of having Oklahoma in the college football playoff, that didn't hurt too bad either. So I think the Big 12 scraped by here, and it could have been a lot worse when you look at it.
Yeah, we heard from Bowlesby back in mid to late March in his media teleconference. The fact that they thought, numbers-wise, that every member university would still just about hit what they were expecting,
right,
to provide to each athletic department. And I mean, again, 1.1 million off from what the target was, all things considered, is actually I think pretty good on their part, because he mentioned the fact that while they were going to lose some money from some from these Big 12 championships that didn't get held, they're also going to be saving some money because they weren't going to be spending money on the advertising and the having to pay for the use of locations and stuff like that, hotel stays for all the the teams and the officials and Big 12 officials and all that other stuff. And then they said that they were taking a pay cut for league administrators, probably to help soften it as well. So, this is, and we also have to keep in mind that Bowlesby mentioned the fact that they had kind of had a rainy day fund from over the years that they've been, funneling money into, that they were able to kind of dip into to help, probably, I'm assuming they didn't completely deplete that, because you never know what's going to happen next year, but they were able to dip in enough to where they could soften the blow of what happened this spring.
A rainy day / coronavirus fund, because they knew what was going to happen. Yeah. That, it's a win. It really is. When you look at it in between the lines there, what could have ultimately happened, and if we were not where we were now, and there was going to be a loss of a college football season, obviously we'd be talking about something different, but it's important. I mean, when you're able to get to not even take part in March Madness, out of all things, and able to just lose a little over $1 million per school, you got to take that as a W right now in this situation. So they definitely came out on top compared to some other non-Power 5 conferences, as we know that they're hurting right now, which, we talked about. So some schools are going to have to cut sports. And I think there were some people that thought, well, is that going to be the case in the Big 12? When we said, and we'll still continue to say, that would only happen somewhere in the Big 12 if there were no football.
Yeah. Well, I heard reports, a read report earlier this week that UConn, which obviously not a power football athletic department, but in other sports they are. There's reports that they might have to cut 8 sports teams, which would drop them from 24 to the prerequisite of 16 to be an FBS athletic department, because of because of this, and because they were already hemorrhaging money from their from their football program, and so this is huge. And again, I still think some athletic departments are going to take hits. We obviously heard from the Baylor president pretty early on in this that they were going to have a shortfall within their university, and some of it was going to overlap with athletics as well. But it is, I think it's a positive for the universities and the athletic departments to see that the conference themselves are be able to kind of reach that at least as close to that goal as originally intended.
Let's look at football just again real quick before we get out of here for the weekend. I meant to bring this up yesterday, but it had become official. I don't know if we had actually talked about the onside kick proposal. I don't know if we ever got to that, but it was proposed obviously in the NFL, instead of an onside kick, that you could go for it on 4th and 15 instead. And if you completed those 15 yards, you got a new possession, and that could only happen twice in a game. That was going to be the rule. The NFL has tabled that idea. When I saw that original idea, I mean, were you in favor for that? Like, if the NFL had said, let's go ahead with this instead of the onside kick, would you have been like, yeah, that's totally fine?
Yes, on 2 regards. Because of the fact that we have Patrick Mahomes, and 4th and 15 is a chip shot for him, is a layup, if you will. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I mean, the numbers showed it when they were talking about this possible move, that since the changes they've made to kickoffs, onside kickoffs are pretty much obsolete. I mean, they're pointless.
They don't work. They just don't. Yeah. I said that the biggest, the most important one, and the one that actually worked, was when Sean Payton and the Saints did it against the Colts to start the Super Bowl second half that year. That was it. I mean, there's really nothing. And like the percentage, I think it was at like 10% of times that it is successful. It's pointless. There were the argument that the owners went against with was, and why it didn't go through, well, it's too gimmicky. It disrupts the natural flow. No. This is entertaining. This would gain more viewers. more people would be inclined to watch. You're trying to tell me that if the Chiefs had just scored and they were getting ready to kick off, they said, actually, we're going to go for it on 4th and 15. More people wouldn't tune over to that one? Yeah.
Well, and I saw Philadelphia. Who I don't know if they were the originators of this.
They
but
were.
They had,
yes.
Okay. They had 2 amendments that they added to it that I think were smart. That I think were going to help it was the fact that it would be an untimed down.
Yep.
So it wouldn't mess with the play clock or the game clock. But then also the fact that you could not do it in overtime. Which makes sense. Which totally makes sense. I mean, like I still think you should, if you're kicking off, to open up overtime. If you want to do it, I think it's fair. You should be able. But like if you makes sense that if the team scores first with a field goal, doesn't suddenly do an onside kick, recover it, and the other team never get a chance.
Yeah.
And that, essentially do the 4th and 15, never get a chance. It makes sense. So I'm not surprised, but I am surprised that they're not changing it, because at some point we just have to realize that the kickoff onside and otherwise is so unnecessary in football right now anymore in NFL, and honestly to an extent in college football, that why do we even have it anymore?
Yeah, it's by not doing this, to me, it's a failure to adapt by the league, because like I said, it's obsolete.
But are we really that surprised? Because again,
I'm not.
This is the same sport, and I'm going to go back to it. The fact of the matter is, ultimately, and if both teams are tied at the end of regulation, the outcome of the game can still essentially hinge on a coin flip.
Yeah, which is exactly why I had said the other day, when I found out that it was tabled, was I surprised? Not at all. Because the overtime rules are absolutely, and they've been a crime for a long time. And I'm not just saying this as because of what happened to the Chiefs. I've said this for years and years. Yeah, it should be changed, and the more that this doesn't get changed is absolutely ridiculous. Real quickly here too, they talked about pass interference. It was funny because the NFL vice president, he came out and said, I got to admit, last year with our pass interference replays that we implemented, we didn't do a good job. And I was like, oh, no crap, you didn't do a good job.
I don't believe that. Yeah, I thought that you did peachy keen.
The number I saw of challenges that were overturned on pass interference was so extreme. I don't even want to, it was awful. It was absolutely embarrassing. And he went as far to say stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, it was the truth. And their idea was, well, why not try to implement what they call a sky judge into the game this year? And what that is, obviously, you throw a referee up in the booth who has the opportunity to make some of those calls. I think that makes sense. But what I said throughout the entire football season last year when it came down to it was the reason these refs aren't going to change these challenges, they don't want to admit they're wrong so many times. And that's what they were. They were wrong over and over and over.
Well, but that's the thing is, and that's the interesting thing is that it's not necessarily their decision now in the NFL, because it goes to New York. So ultimately it was it was the
replay officials there.
Reveron or whatever.
Yeah.
He was the one not flipping it, and there's a reason now that he's kind of on the outskirts, and they're trying to force him out because he was so bad for NFL last year.
Well, and I saw this point, and tell me how true this really is. I mean, we at home can sit there on our $300 televisions and crystal clear HD on 70-inch screens and can tell you if that's pass interference, usually with one look most of the time. And you get NFL. I mean, why is that opportunity not available to referees when it comes to reviewing some of this stuff?